it's forced us to just dig deep because we're basing a lot of it off of this particular study off of Heiser's podcast, and he leaves no stone, he leaves no letter of Greek unturned. So you have to digest a lot of stuff to be able to sort it. But anyway, so this week, since we didn't get to it last week, we're going to use it this week, and I wanted you here.
Well,
so you're here.
If I can help you.
Or just to see. All right, everybody doing, this whole group over here, let's see, Wes and Melissa are usually here, and they'll probably all wander in late today. And I know we have Embrace Grace. Candace is out there.
Down there.
Yeah, she's out there with them. That's great. All right, Meredith, where are we starting today? We got the notes out already? Yep. Of course, we're going to start with engaging the culture segment. As you are going, disciple them. That is the engaging the culture segment. Now, this is kind of a funny engaging the culture because it's three very different things. And we've been using a episode of what's his name? The book.
Always Be Ready.
Always Be Ready by Hugh Ross.
Yeah.
And we've missed the last couple of weeks because we've just found some others. So we're going to still go back to Hugh Ross and bring some of this to you because it's all so good. All right, well, we're going to start with this. And these are three interesting ways of engaging the culture. Have you seen this first one? Okay, this is the pro-life Spider-Man. The pro-life Spider-Man. Have you seen it? Let's see some of that. This is funny.
You're saying pro-lice.
Pro-life, yeah, he's very pro-life. Pro-life Spider-Man.
Thank you so much.
What took me about surprising is how young this guy is.
So, when you think of like professional pro-lifers, you don't imagine them scaling skyscrapers to speak out about the issue they care so much about. There is one man who is climbing buildings in order to bring attention to the unborn. We're going to talk to him live next. In May, someone, we still don't know who, despite the investigation, leaked the Supreme Court's draft opinion overturning Roe v. Wade. So there was varied response to this, but here's one of the responses. A day after that happened, a college student and pro-lifer called Maison Deschamps, apparently real name, decided to protest abortion in a pretty unusual, pretty remarkable way. He climbed the outside of the tallest building in San Francisco, the Salesforce Tower. It's 61 stories high. He climbed without using a rope. Here's footage.
That freaks me out.
I don't
God, it freaks me out. I don't like heights anyway. This just scares me to death. So basically, I wanted Bart here too because I think Bart should do that. He should scale the Baptist building. He should scale the Baptist building. You too, hey, you and Bart, you should scale it together.
To a point where there is no turning back.
Yeah. He's climbed several other skyscrapers after the Salesforce Tower. That would include the Devon Tower in Oklahoma City and the New York Times building in Manhattan. Some call him the pro-life Spider-Man. Maison Deschamps joins us tonight.
Look how young this guy is.
Pronouncing your name correctly. Tell us, but I'm just amazed by this whole thing. Tell us why you're doing this.
Yeah, we are in a cultural battle right now. And so I started this project because I wanted to inspire young people to speak out against abortion, regardless of the backlash and the criticism that comes with being pro-life. And I also wanted to raise money for Let Them Live to help these moms who are in a crisis pregnancy. I mean, you're seeing states like California pay for abortions. And there's never been a better time than now for us as pro-lifers to put our money where our mouths are and support LetThemLive.org and these women who are in crisis.
Well, of course. And it's hard to see why it's controversial to help pregnant women who want to have their babies. That's obviously a good thing. What's it like, I have to ask, being 61 stories above San Francisco with no rope?
It differs person to person. For me, it's not that bad, but I wouldn't recommend anyone else go try it.
How did you wind up climbing office building? I mean, it just looks like guaranteed death from my perspective.
Well, I was inspired by a guy named Alain Robert, and I had no money, no influence. I'm in college, and I thought to myself, what can I do to help this pro-life movement? And, all I had was the gifts God gave me.
Incredible. How do you learn to free climb a building? Do you just do it?
Well, you know, Tucker, if you want to come with me on the next one, I can show you how.
I'm 53, man. No, but I'm very impressed. But how do you train for this? And how hard is it?
Yeah, you know, I train on rock outside, out here in Las Vegas at Red Rock Canyon and Yosemite National Park, and it transfers over pretty easily, surprisingly.
That's incredible. And I have to ask, because it's irresistible, which is scarier, climbing a 61-story building with no ropes or admitting that you're pro-life in a group full of NPR listeners?
You know, I think it's scarier to go on Tucker Carlson than it is to climb the skyscraper, personally.
Least hostile environment you'll ever find. And last question, is this illegal? I mean, like, what happens when you get to the top?
Yeah, you know, surprisingly in Detroit, there's a law that says you can't leash your pet alligator to a fire hydrant, but there's no law that says you can't climb the Renaissance Center. And so usually I'm arrested, but it's just to make an example out of me so there's no copycats, and it's not that bad.
It's not that bad.
I don't know anyone who'd be brave enough to copy it. Incredible. And I'm saying, pardon my bad English, tell us how to pronounce your name so I can not forget it.
It is Mason Deschamps.
Mason Deschamps. Great to see you tonight. Mason, thanks very much.
Isn't that God? We just watched that this week, so I think somebody in here should volunteer. But we want y'all to wear a NexGen shirt, and we get a little publicity for the class. That I just thought was that there, Bart. I wanted you here for this.
I'm sorry.
Because we think you two should climb the Baptist building next week. That's what this guy did for pro-life. He just climbed the outside of the building.
Yeah, I don't think they passed enough for that.
Yeah, y'all two should do that. No, what took me, one, I just thought it was a cool story, but then when I saw him, and what was so cool about it was I saw how young he was. So you got a guy who is unabashedly pro-life, that age. And I love the little statement he said, well, I'm in college, I have no money, I have no way to do any of this, so how do I support them? So he goes and climbs a building. That's
engaging the culture.
You climbed our building?
No, he climbed it. No, I'm starting you easy. This was a 63-story building. Y'all's only like 5 stories. How easy is that?
Death is death, so.
Death is death.
Y'all's is simple. That's nothing. Well, you can even start on the church. It's only 3 stories. Start here and then go over there.
Death is still death.
But anyway, I just thought that was cool. He's a guy who just goes, I need to engage here. So he just goes and figures out a way to do it. That's pretty cool. Yeah, obviously just not doing that. Okay, Meredith, Halloween is listen to this. Halloween is National Evangelism Day. Now, when we heard that Halloween was National Evangelism Day, we're like Googling the Southern Baptist Convention or something. No, that's not true. What it was is Ray Comfort. Y'all know Ray Comfort with Living Waters? They just declared it National Evangelism Day, so nobody actually officially did it.
You want to talk about this?
So yeah, you do that. So here's another way you can engage.
This is, how did you order this before we saw this video?
Oh yeah, it was video this morning.
This morning, yeah.
We ordered this about a week or so ago because y'all remember how we set up the front of our house? The big debate in our family. We wanted ghouls, goblins, and demons. She said, no, that's the wrong message, so we set up the correct message. So then when we did that,
Thank you, Meredith.
so that's what we did. She's on it. And then we
Compromise, marital compromise.
Yeah, that's what it was. And then we said, well, you know, why don't we do something when trick-or-treaters come? So I Googled this, and of course, Living Waters is going to have something.
And I think it's funny too. We're teaching from the Demons book today for Halloween. But this all relates to this word asceticism on the board. So we are going to learn what asceticism means.
Define it real quick.
I'm not going to say it.
Okay, we're not going to define it yet. Asceticism.
Okay. Big words. So in your casual conversation, you can say, that's just asceticism.
That's asceticism, but I have no part in that.
No part of that. Okay, so this is Ray Comfort, Living Waters Ministry, Ray Comfort's Halloween box. He says Halloween is National Evangelism Day, and along with your candy, by the way, we can't be Christians and give out just tracts. You have to go for the good candy.
Yeah.
You're going to be a Christian.
If I come to your house and you give me just a religious tract, oh, you're getting eggs in your house. No way.
Joel is big on the candy bar thing anyway, because he just loves all of this.
Oh yeah, I go and
So
get the
he
biggest
goes to
candy bar
Sam's.
cans, so all the kids will come to our house.
So he wants them to come, so he gives out like whole candy bars at the
Yep.
good stuff. So we're known as the Candy Bar House. So in addition to the Candy Bar House, they have these little tracks like, hey kids, are you a genius? Test your memory. And this is the famous, do you want $1 million bill tract? And then, do you want a trick or treat? This one lady said, do you want a trick or treat? Okay, they want a trick and a treat. And here's this,
That's
which color is longer? Or
Which one's longer?
bigger, how do you say it? The black, but what about this?
Which one's longer?
It's a trick.
Yeah.
And then you have to take both of these cards, and it's a Christian thing.
So you can do that
Part
in 2
one,
seconds
part
to the
two.
guy to the kid that comes to the door.
So we wish that we had done this and given y'all the opportunity to order for yourselves last week, but we are going to share if you want to come get some tracts to hand out at your house.
I divided them all in half because we're not going to. There's like 100, and we're not going to have
We're not
50
gonna
trick or
have
treaters. So there are 50 of all these. Where? Well, this box. Yeah, I took ours out.
We're
So
gonna
if you just
share.
happen to want some, or want 2 or 3 or 4, or just want to check them out, take them with you.
Okay, so here's the video related.
Yeah, we just thought this was a cool video too. 2267. What is
My
it?
right keeps jumping off. but
I don't
anyway.
know.
Okay, Halloween National Evangelism Day. This is one of their Living Waters ministers. Hopefully it'll work. What happened last week, Joel?
We'll buy our own. You may just have to come out and back on it again.
Yeah.
Because you just played something that worked. That worked.
Spiritual warfare within the church.
Exactly. I do kind of laugh because some of the discernment ministries, they wake up with a headache and it's Satan attacking them, and so I kind of laugh. But it's true. There is spiritual warfare. I don't know if it's busy.
Hey everybody, this is a really exciting night. This is Halloween night, and there's a lot of kids hopefully coming to our door. And so what we're going to do as a family is engage kids with the gospel. We're going to teach our kids how to reach out to the culture, their own peers, with the gospel on a night when it's typically used, with images of evil and all kinds of things. Rather than run away from it, we're going to teach our kids how to engage it and how to reach their peers so that they grow up to be adults who also reach their peers. So these are the gospel messages that we're going to hand out. We have a nice little Ziploc bag here.
We're going to do that.
It's got about, see, 1, 2, 3 different pieces of candy in there. And we have this gospel tract inside. It says, hey kids, test your memory, see if you're a genius. It comes from Living Waters. Fantastic tracts for kids. Very, very kid-friendly. On the back it says, for kids who like to think. It's really intriguing. Chances are they're not going to throw it away because it looks neat, and they're going to read it. And probably some moms and dads will read it too. Enjoy this footage, and maybe will inspire you to do the same thing with your kids next year. So what's going on tonight?
We are going to hand out candy and some gospel tracts. We give up gospel
Wow. So why do we do that?
because we don't worship our gods. We worship true God.
Yeah. So why do we give gospel tracts out?
Because it's one of the things that we can find.
Yeah. We can show people and give them the message of hope. What are gospel tracts about?
Jesus.
All right, he goes on to get it, just shows them finishing up their day. So we just thought that was kind of cool. All right, so far, one engaging the culture was climbing the outside of a building for pro-life. This is just a simple engaging the culture where a guy will. What I find interesting here is obviously kids, they'll look at these cartoons with the kids, and like you said, some parents will read them just because, hey, what'd you get? But especially these days, because they're checking all the candy for fentanyl and razor blades. So the parents are going to see it too. I'm laughing, but what's kind of cool here is probably the biggest message here was to his own kids. he's teaching his own kids that we think in terms of engaging at all times. And it's so funny because Meredith was on call this morning, so Reed, John, and I came in the car ourselves. Meredith wasn't in there, and I had a great conversation with my son about, we were talking about what we're doing this morning, and I'm always preaching at him about engage. And so yeah, I had a neat conversation with my youngest son about ways to engage. It was just based off what we're doing. So anyway,
And our big thing is, with engaging the culture is sometimes we as Christians, we run away and hide in a little cocoon, and we want to say Halloween is bad.
wait, let's ask, were any of y'all's parents like that where no Halloween, absolutely
You couldn't
satanic,
celebrate.
so yours were more like that? It's a
And some
preacher background.
Some people don't celebrate like Christmas trees, like we'll put Christmas trees in their home because
There's
it
a
tends
pagan
from
origin to it.
origin. So I just think, and we'll actually talk about this.
Stop bashing George's parents.
I just think, there are ways that God can use you within the culture to be salt and light. Like,
Yeah, we tend to go that way as far, but I mean, I understand there are folks who they take a stand, a much stronger stance against it. I fall like this. Don't run from it. Engage the mess out of it and turn it into what you're supposed to be, and that's an image of God. Use everything in this culture to image Him. I go that direction. But all right. Here's the last engagement. See, I want to do this because she was just saying, I'm going to cut this. No, I'm not going to play it.
it takes time for me to get to it once I get
I'm trying to get to it.
Okay.
I think it's
Just
all
for
right.
1 minute.
It's only for 1 minute. I like it. Y'all may not like it. And we got to train them to listen to audio
But
because they
it's
got to listen to
cheesy, though.
15 minutes. See, I knew she didn't like it. I'm gonna do it anyway. She'll find it. All right. So what is this? Because I've got a point. I'll go ahead and make the point while you're trying to find it. The point is, this is Babylon. Y'all know Babylon B. We've shown several of the. We use their stuff a lot.
Stylish, got that covered too.
We got a guy climbing the outside of the building. You have a young family handing out tracts along with candy because kids are coming to their door anyway. And now you got, what is Babylon B? That's all Babylon B is. It is guys who got together who are Christians. By the way, I don't agree with all their theologies there. I don't agree with 90% of people's theology because theology is complicated and everybody's different. They tend to be more Calvinist. They tend blah, blah, blah. But they're Christians. They're brothers and sisters who are using the comedy that they love to try to impact the world for Christ. It's just an interesting thing. So here's just another way that our group is engaged in culture.
I heard, and I
See,
heard
what I
that
did want to
they
do.
were the ones that impressed Elon Musk
Yes.
by Twitter.
Yeah, I heard
That he
that.
reached out to them. I did not know that.
They interviewed Elon Musk because they were thrown off of Twitter
Right.
for a comedy skit. Oh, it was the comedy skit where they took
Chris Pratt.
Yeah, what was it? You remember our Surgeon General?
Right.
The Surgeon
Yeah.
General who's transvestite, transsexual. I don't even know the right term anymore. Chris is a woman, whatever he is. Well, they made him Man of the Year. It was a woman. No, they made him Man of the Year. So it's just a picture of him with Man of the Year award from Babylon B. Well, they kicked him off of Twitter and completely deleted their account for that. It's like, it's a satire. It's funny. It's humorous. So Elon Musk saw that and said, okay, this has got to stop.
He reached out to them.
Yeah, he reached out to him. They interviewed.
They interviewed him.
Constantly fact checking the Babylon Baby.
Oh, that's right. Oh, that was hilarious.
That's like satirical side. They're constantly fact checking.
Yeah, they do that all the time where they'll do a fact check. It's like, it was a joke. Of course it's not a correct fact, you morons.
Well, the point that he likes about this is they make fun of us as Christians too.
Oh yeah, they make
So-
fun of Christians all the time. You gotta have a hard shell when you listen to it because they make fun of Christians hard. All this is just a quick 1 minute audio tape. They do this little skit once a week where it's the Babylon B News. And so anyway, just listen to this one clip. And I
He is
also
best
liked
to
it-
imitate Matt Walt.
I also liked it because it's what we're doing. It's making fun of Christians who don't know their Bible.
Who refused to lend his voice to the project. A local man was suddenly struck with fear as he stood in line to enter heaven when St. Peter unexpectedly asked him to answer how many warriors were in the tribe of Simeon at the time of the Exodus.
I don't know. I spent my entire life reading the Bible regularly, but I usually just skip stuff like the genealogies and numbering of the tribes. Are we really supposed to read those?
For his part, St. Peter remained stone-faced as he waited for the man's answer.
Oh, you don't know the answer either, eh? I guess you also won't be able to tell me the number and types of animals each tribe gave as offerings for the consecration of the tabernacle, What about telling me which tribes of Israel were kept to the north of the tent of meeting? Seriously, did you ever read your Bible?
The man being questioned began sweating profusely as he frantically searched his memory for the correct answer that could help him pass this unexpected test. The people in line behind him were heard asking each other if anyone had a Bible handy so they could start speed cramming for the questions they would receive when their turns came. St. Peter continued to expertly stifle his smile, enjoying the knowledge that his little prank was torturing these poor folks one more time before they entered eternal bliss in the presence of the Lord. At airtime, St. Peter was suspended from gate duty as it was revealed he didn't know the answer to the question either. Now you're up to date on the only...
You see why I wanted to play that? That is too funny. That's can you imagine? You know what that's got to be a playoff of? I know there are a couple. Was it you? There are a couple people in there who is a Holy Grail fan. We got a few Holy Grail fans. You know what that is? That's the nights when they show up. What is it? Across the passage on the mountain, and when they ask them how far can a swallow fly? Yeah, you know that's a play from that. It's got to be. I guarantee you that was the connection. Because if you're not a Holy Grand fan, which you probably shouldn't be. Holy Grail fan. I'm sorry. Which you probably shouldn't be because it's very sacrilegious and stuff. Everything about it.
But the early Christian days for you.
Yeah, that's early, exactly. Those are the early Christian days. Meredith has kind of got me out of watching any of that kind of stuff. I love satire. I love that type of humor.
He does. That's his humor.
It engages your mind. You have to engage to get it. And I like, and again, this guy's vulgar too, but I can't help but watch him sometimes. But that's Greg Gutfeld. Y'all ever watch anybody in here ever watch any of the Greg Gutfeld stuff? I see someone smiling.
Anybody admit to that?
Anybody admit it?
My mom and I were gonna go see him before COVID. That's how.
That's how it's. But again, he is vulgar. There's too much of him that's vulgar and nasty. But the style of, why am I off on this? The style of humor. It just engages. Yeah, I should have. Sorry, Greg. You know, he watches our channel. But I just like satire at some point. That's what I like about my thing. Okay. Okay. Now I told you we're gonna do this every week until everybody in here says something. No, not really. But this week, what are any engaging the culture stories from y'all? Did you engage in any tiny way, a conversation at Kroger? I know a lot of y'all folks did things yesterday. Anybody want to share anything? I told Meredith we need to make an announcement this week to remind them so they'll be prepared to share.
It doesn't have to be major life thing. It just can be small.
We did a Halloween scary house with the student council, and you know me, I don't do scary Halloween. Like I put out pumpkins, like that's not me. I don't do scary. I don't like it.
You missed our whole intro. That was all about Halloween stuff.
It's fine. So I like prayed before I got there because I'm literally in charge of this thing this day, and I'm like, dear God, I don't know why, but okay, you've got a point. We had downtime, and I was doing stuff for national boards and had to ask their religious affiliation, and so I got to ask a lot of questions. I was like, thank you for being honest with me. And I got to find out that a lot of my students say they're Christians, but some don't go to church. And then one person was like, I'm questioning. And I was like, that's fine, keep questioning. I was like, and I was able to say, if you have any questions for more, you can always talk to me. So being able to have that opening in a setting, in a public school, in a haunted house for Halloween was just really cool. I was like, you're literally acting demonic over there, but we're having this such a great conversation.
The gates of hell will not prevail.
Yeah. It was really cool. It was really
That is awesome.
Because I was just asking.
And if you had not been in that situation,
and had I not,
you would not have had that opportunity.
Not been doing national boards, not doing all this stuff. So it just, I needed to do it for school because it was something I was doing to better myself to teach them. So it was all legal and above board.
Awesome. If I understand right too, the way public schools work, if a child asks you as a teacher, you can't go in there and preach the gospel. But if a child engages you, you're perfectly fine to respond and give an honest answer.
Correct, especially if they ask you your opinion,
yes.
You can give it, but you have to.
This is my opinion, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, you have to say, this is my opinion. And I'm allowed to have like stuff on my desk and behind my desk, like I have a Bible verse in Spanish, my Bible is, almost always placed.
Because you have a verse in there, right, too, and it doesn't end when you go inside the school.
It doesn't.
Did I say that way?
It doesn't, we took classes on that, but anyway.
Very
awesome.
Very cool. Anybody else want to share anything before we move on? Oh, she's volunteering somebody.
She's like, no.
All right, well, this week, any form of engagement, be ready to share it next week, because that segment's going to stay there forever. Because the whole point is first of all, what is the Great Commission? Go into all the world and disciple them. That's your number one job. So, and that means engage. And so the only way you can disciple is if it begins with engagement. So simple Bible study and learning, as much as I love learning and all that kind of stuff, if it stops there and never crosses the line to engagement, you're not doing what your commander told you to do. And I'm just getting more and more passionate about that. If it stops with study, learning, community, barbecues, cornhole, if it stops there, then you're nothing different than the country club. You might as well join River Hills over there, play a little tennis while you're doing it, because that's what a country club does. It's not what a Christian does. Ouch. Oh, okay. Let's move on now. Let's go. You want to do this part?
Okay, I'm going to read what we did last week. Oh, that's right. This is our review, Colossians 2:13 through 15.
Yeah, now the whole review is going to be Heiser, because, last week, that was cool stuff. I thought it was detailed. It's what is this certificate that's been nailed to the cross? Why was Paul describing uncircumcision, baptism, nailed the certificate to the cross? Your sins have been forgiven. Not just you, Gentile, but us, meaning all of us, meaning all of humanity. The changing of the pronouns lumped them together. So he's talking about all of humanity, not just Gentiles or Jews. Why is all that going on? And then he launches straight into, and because of that, the powers and authorities have been disarmed. And that when we talk about what that supernatural disarming was. So anyway, so this week as a review, we're just going to let y'all listen to Heiser. Heiser's going to explain the exact same verse, the thing. It's his commentary on verse 15. That is the review.
So first, starting with Colossians 2:13, and even though you were dead in your transgressions in the uncircumcision of your flesh, he nevertheless made you alive with him, having forgiven all your transgressions. Verse 14, and he has destroyed what was against us, a certificate of indebtedness expressed in decrees opposed to us. He has taken it away by nailing it to the cross. 15, disarming the rulers and authorities.
So whatever he just described is what disarmed them. What did he just describe? He described Jesus Christ's death, burial, and resurrection on the cross, bringing us back in the family. And that disarmed them. Interesting.
He has taken it away by nailing it to the cross, disarming the rulers and authorities. He has made a public disgrace of them, triumphing over them by the cross.
I'll throw this in here too, just a little tidbit here. I always laugh, how I like to use the phrase baby Baptist. We just tend to think in terms of the bad guy as Satan. The first thing you notice immediately with Paul's writing is it's always plural. There are rulers and authorities. The unseen realm is far more complicated than, as again, in 21st century, Christians tend to push the supernatural out. We tend to see it so simplistically. And again, just something as simple as that. Paul over and over again, rulers, authorities, principalities, and powers. It's always plural because it ain't just one bad guy over there.
So when we were going back to this, where Heiser picks up on this the notes that we just passed out, this little tab I have in the copy is where we're going to start, where it says once again. But I just want to say, we have to give you the context of what he's starting. We've taught this before about where he asked his disciples, who do you say that I am? And Peter had his great moment, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God.
I remember that.
So I'm taking you to Matthew 16, verse 13, where you go to the region of Caesarea Philippi. And we've taught this before, but I just want to remind you where that is.
Well, the reason we're reminding you is Heiser's commentary on Colossians 2:15, but he starts with this passage because this is the backdrop to what's going on, what Paul's talking about. So that's why we're going here.
So you've heard us say that Caesarea Philippi is a place at the foot of Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon is in the northern part of Israel. And we're going to show you when we went there.
Now, see if y'all remember from many, many months ago. First of all, you remember this book? What does that say? Reversing Hermon. So this book is a Heiser book, and he was reversing what happened on Mount Hermon. Anybody remember what happened on Mount Hermon? I'm sorry?
Watchers came down.
Anybody remember that?
Yeah.
Somebody else said that here? There you go. In the book of Enoch, Mount Hermon is the mountain. Well, that's just the book of Enoch. The book of Enoch actually identifies Mount Hermon as the mountain that the Watchers came down on, which is what Genesis 6 is about. The idea that the fallen angels came down, mated with humans, and created the Nephilim. That happened on Mount Hermon. At the foot of Mount Hermon, I probably should just wait and let you do this, but this is the foot of Hermon. At the foot of Mount Hermon which is the area of Caesarea Philippi, is this cave, and that was known in Jesus' day as the gates of hell. So when he said the gates of hell will not prevail against it, meaning the church, he's standing there, and Meredith says always, and I agree, because we stood there. You'll see a picture of us standing there. As you can see, Jesus pointing. He was pointing to
The gates
this.
of hell will not prevail.
It is an actual location. It's not just a metaphor. It was a location. And Jesus went there deliberately for a reason to make this statement. And of course, these are the ruins now, but we're about to see a picture. At the time, there was a big temple of Pan there. These are the ruins of the temple. Temple of Pan, human sacrifices were done in the gates of hell. They would throw humans into this cave. That's what was going on in Jesus' day and prior. And he went there to state that these gates of hell will not prevail. It was a deliberate provocation of the unseen realm. Do you know what Jesus did immediately after this if you read the Bible? You
We're about to see.
Yeah, you get the I'm going to give you the overview for you. See, you get the transfiguration on a high mountain. Most scholars believe that was Mount Hermon. They then went on to the mountain. You get the transfiguration where Jesus has a corporate meeting with Moses and Elijah. And y'all know the story of the transfiguration, and then at that point forward, Jesus then begins I think it is about a 2 to 3 week period, I forget what the time stamp is, his march to Jerusalem to be killed. That starts at this point. This is the beginning of that.
The
And he goes there
acceleration. It was
for a
the
reason.
acceleration. Mhm. Okay, so this is a modern day picture of Mount Hermon, Caesarea Philippi. This is an artistic depiction of what was there in the ancient times, because this is a temple.
And that was the mouth of the cave there where
Right.
sacrifices
And
were.
the idea is they sacrificed it out of the back of that temple there. And that's not where I'm going. Let's see, NexGen. This is our guide. She's on mute.
That's me.
Matthew 16, Caesarea Philippi. Who do people say that I am?
Sorry, I'm not a very good. This is that.
The temple
The
of
temple of
Pan
Pan was there.
was called by Jesus studied the gates of hell. And Jesus had taken were sacrificed.
We would be standing on the floor of the temple and that cave was behind it. Everybody gets enamored by this animal. We're like, would you please talk about the cave? Everybody's looking at this animal.
I'm like, okay, let's go back to this. It's so cute. It's so cute. That's more of the same, the ruins,
Part of the ruins of the temple and all. You can go there today. We went there 3 years ago.
And there's that opening that we saw first, that modern day opening. Highly recommend it. Okay, here's my drawing. I didn't draw, but this is the idea of the Mount Hermon, the gates of hell, that opening.
We're at the foot.
This area is called Bashan.
Wait, yeah, we're so off the notes.
Yeah.
Anybody remember?
It's right here.
Oh, is that, wait, all right. Anybody remember, where does Bashan come from? You remember this? All right, we know that in Psalm 22, which is an incredible description of the crucifixion, right? Well, Paul, if you read Psalm 22, it talks about Christ, it talks about on the cross, talks about the suffering of the servant on the cross, suffering of the servant dying, and then it says, the bulls of Bashan surround me at the cross. That's because these supernatural beings were there. It's a reference to Bashan, and it's a picture of the cross. And it's just a quick glimpse from the Old Testament of the supernatural battle that was going on at the cross. That's what the bulls of Bashan are. This was Bashan.
All right, so Matthew 16, verse 13. When Jesus came to the area of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" And they answered, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" And Simon
Peter's greatest
answered,
moment.
"You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "You are blessed, Simon, son of Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not overpower it." Now you see the significance of him standing right there.
And we're not going to go into this day. We won't go into this day, but again, if you look at the Greek here, Peter's Greek word for rock, for stone, really means stone, pebble, and Jesus says, and this rock, well, I know, what is this, upon this rock, he changes the Greek word.
Yeah.
The Catholic Church says, oh, see, he's saying he's going to build the church on Peter. Peter is the first pope. No, all you got to do is look at the Greek and realize he's using two different words. He's saying, you're a little pebble. Upon this rock, I will build my church. He's pointing at this.
We think he's pointing.
What is the supernatural Bashan, the rock at which the supernatural spirits were known to be at that time, and all the worship and all that. And so it is upon this rock I will put my kingdom above this kingdom, and those gates of hell will not prevail against it. Isn't that interesting? It's just a really cool
Also, what he's
view.
about to say next, think your great commission that he's about to give his disciples when he says the next part. And I tell you, Peter, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not overpower it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you release on earth will have been released in heaven. Then he instructed his disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Christ.
Isn't that interesting?
And then verse 21, from that time on, you hear the acceleration. From that time on, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hand of the elders, the chief priests, and the experts in the law, and be killed, and on the third day be raised.
So it's at that point where the march to Jerusalem began. Isn't that interesting? Jump in there.
With regard to spiritual warfare and with regard to Peter's greatest moment, although he was filled with the Holy Spirit, the next verse, Peter took him aside, being Christ, and rebuked him, saying, God forbid it, Lord, that this should never happen to you. And what did Jesus say to him after just 6 verses earlier, saying, you're filled
Get
with the
behind me, Satan.
Get behind me, Satan.
Yeah.
This spiritual warfare is so real, and pantheism is still alive.
Yeah.
Anyone that proclaims we all worship the same God is a pantheist.
Amen. Hey, that is my favorite teaching. One of my favorites, because I just get emotional every time you read this. That's why I always refer to it as Peter's greatest moment. 6 verses later, Jesus refers to him as Satan, basically,
because he had a demon spirit on him.
That's right.
The spirit of error.
That's exactly right. And then I just love this teaching. One day we'll do it again here. Well, we did a little piece of it when we did the only man-made thing in heaven, where Jesus shows up after the resurrection, and the disciples are out there. What does Peter do? He throws his cloak on, he jumps into the water, and he goes to save. Why? Because he had just denied. Peter's greatest moment was followed by being called Satan and then denying Christ 3 times. And you can only imagine the guilt. But on that moment, when he realized it was Jesus on that shore, that's my redemption. And he wasn't waiting to pedal to him. I just love that. Because he knew where his redemption was. It's just Peter's greatest moment to his weakest moment to his redemption. It's just beautiful. Anyway, all right.
Do y'all think that just hit me, that verse where he says not to tell anyone that I'm the Messiah? And I think about what Paul said in 1 Corinthians 2. He said, none of the rulers of this age.
We're going to read that in a minute.
Understood this, for they had.
No, you're good.
For they had, if they would not have crucified the Lord of glory.
Absolutely.
So he knew he was in that area. He didn't want to. I always think, who is he not wanting to tell? Well, it's them. Right. It's the supernatural world, not necessarily.
There was a mystery, if you will, we know it, to God's plan. The details of the crucifixion of Christ and the role of the Messiah are clear as the bell on this side of the cross, looking back through the writings of Paul, the Gospels, and what happened at Calvary. Looking forward, that's why Heiser says this a lot. He said that's why it's so cryptic. It's cryptic in the Old Testament because in the battle plan, you don't give the enemy your details. And Heiser said this, and this is probably maybe a little more moderate in what I love studying eschatology too, and I had a very specific belief of what I think is the most true. But there's no way to know for sure, and I love the way Heiser said it. He said, just like it was cryptic, Jesus' first coming, he goes, I suspect that's what you're finding in your Bible. It's just as cryptic the second coming, and you're only going to fully understand it when you can look back. And I said, that's probably a pretty good hermeneutic there, probably. Anyway, I just find that interesting.
2 things to ponder. Matthew 24, 25.
I know where you're going.
I've told you everything in advance. ponder. And then Luke 4:41 says, demons also were coming out of many, shouting, "You are the Son of God." But rebuking them, he would not allow them to speak because they knew him to be the Christ.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? They know.
They know. And they say multiple times, "Have you come to torture me before my time?"
Yes.
It was all about timing. He was orchestrating
The
at
cross.
Caesarea Philippi. He was provoking the unseen world. So there was certain knowledge there. He was provoking them to make his crucifixion happen on the exact day that he wanted it to happen.
Was he being Christ-like when he was provoking?
It
It
was
just
provoking.
doesn't make sense to me.
He does say take it to battle. He battles.
Mem is the 13th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and it means it's battle.
Battle.
Mem. Look at how many verses, 13, are actually spiritual warfare battles.
That's awesome.
This is why I've enjoyed so much of Heiser's writing. The Unseen Realm, this is his actual dissertation work. And I love the subtitle. Recovering the Supernatural Worldview of the Bible. The Bible is a supernatural book with a supernatural worldview. In post industrialization, the blah blah blah, where we are now, we've beaten it out of it. And that's why so much of the Bible you can't understand very clearly, because we don't have the supernatural worldview. And you have to get it.
This one, this is a lot that he's going to talk about Plato. When you hear what Plato wrote about,
Yeah.
I'm like,
We're gonna get this.
they understood it.
Oh
Okay.
gosh, we're really gonna get this. I can't believe we're not gonna finish chapter 2.
Okay. Ready? Here we go.
All right, so what we're about to do, what she does with the point of Plato, he's gonna read some of Plato here. The point of Plato is, this is what just drives me crazy about 21st century Christians, that this whole supernatural worldview wasn't a Jewish worldview. It was a worldview of the entire world at the time, both secular, Christian, the neighbors of Israel, all the way over to Greek and the writers of Plato and all that. This was the supernatural worldview of people. We're the only ones who don't understand it.
Yeah.
They did.
Ready?
This is sort of a jumping off point into this whole subject matter that's brought up in verse 15. So let's go back to the victory statement in verse 15, the victory over the rulers and authorities. This is a good place, I think, to summarize the passages where Paul connects the resurrection and ascension with the cross event. Let's just be as broad as we can here. To the defeat of the powers of darkness. Now, I've commented on this before in Q&A. I've commented on it before in a couple of other episodes, but I'm hoping, again, this will be sort of the episode that I can reference in the future as far as this subject matter. I have a whole chapter on this, this idea of the demise of the gods, the nullification of the gods, in my forthcoming book on demons, and what the Bible really says about the powers of darkness. Now, that's not the angel's book. The angel's book is its own thing, and the demon's book is a separate book. It's a companion to the angel's book. I have no idea when the demon's book's going to be out, but I'm going to read you an extended portion of it because of this topic. Again, I'm not going to give you all of it. You're going to have to get the book whenever it becomes available. Again, who knows when that's going to be, but at some point in 2019, and you can get the whole treatment. The major passages on this are covered or touched on in that book. The major passages for this idea in Paul are 1 Corinthians 15, 20 through 24, Colossians 2, 13 through 15, which is where we are, Ephesians 1, 15 to 22, Ephesians 3, 7 to 10, Ephesians 4, 4 through 8, and I actually have an extended discussion of that in the Unseen Realm, so you could just go as well and read that. 1 Peter 3, 18 through 22, that's also Unseen Realm turf, and Romans 15, 8 to 12. So there are a number of passages that I don't discuss specifically in the Unseen Realm that are relevant to this topic, and so I'm going to read you a lengthy excerpt here from the Demons book, and I'm going to skip the Ephesians 4 stuff for sure, since that's an Unseen Realm. So let's just jump in. This comes right after I talk about Ephesians 4 in that book. So in Ephesians 4, 4 through 8, the New Testament draws on cosmic geographical thinking, draws on Psalm 68 specifically, to portray Christ's victory over the powers of darkness. Mount Hermon, which is the Mount of God in Psalm 68, that it was being reclaimed as Yahweh's possession, is an important focus point. So back to the paragraph. Jesus provoked darkness in Bashan and at Mount Hermon to set the circumstances of his death in motion. That's the gates of hell stuff, again, an unseen realm. The provocation was essential because his sacrificial death was essential. One cannot have a resurrection and an ascension without a death. And the resurrection and ascension are central to the re-enthronement of Jesus above all powers. In Ephesians 4:8, Paul read Psalm 68:18 as describing the conquest of supernatural evil, Bashan, which in turn led to the coming of the Spirit and the subsequent gifts to the body of Christ. The coming of the Spirit was, of course, contingent on the death, resurrection, and ascension of Christ to the position of rule, the right hand of the Father. Paul more explicitly connects the finished work of Christ and the defeat of evil spirits, in this case, the hostile gods enslaving the nations, the rulers and authorities, in passages like Colossians 2:8-15. In verse 15, the cosmic forces, the rulers, arche, and authorities, exousia, are disarmed and put to shame. The lemma arche is used of divine beings in the New Testament. I'm not going to read you all the verse references again in this section. So the lemma arche is used of divine beings in the New Testament, including earlier in the same letter, Colossians 1:16. The same is true of the lemma exousia, Colossians 1:13, and you can compare that to Ephesians 2:2. Paul is writing to a Gentile church and clearly has Gentiles in view when he describes his audience as, quote, dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, verse 13. Jews, of course, share the problem of being estranged from God because of sin. Paul makes this clear with language like our transgressions and against us. He includes himself as a Jew in both the problem and the wonder of forgiveness. But Israel had no supernatural rulers and authorities to be disarmed. The nations did, per the Deuteronomy 32 worldview. Two climactic accomplishments are noted here in Colossians by Paul. First, the record of debt that stood against us, Jew and Gentile, was canceled or set aside. Second, the rulers and authorities were disarmed and put to shame. The resurrection, verse 12, was the causative agent to both. For if there was no resurrection, the debt against us would still stand and we would not be made alive together with him. Scholars have been puzzled by the word choice in verse 15, disarmed. The lemma is apekduomai. It is found only here in Colossians 3:9, where it's translated typically put off, remove, strip off the old self. It is obvious that the term would not point to the destruction of the rulers and authorities, as Paul elsewhere has the powers of darkness actively engaged against believers, Ephesians 6:12. Now the key word there is destruction. I'm going to argue that they have been nullified, delegitimized. They're not destroyed yet because that comes at the end. There's still principalities and powers that Paul has to fight and that we have to, we are in conflict with. Back to my paragraph here. Scholars find the idea of removal or stripping of something awkward here. And it is, if one lacks the Deuteronomy 32 framework as a reference point. Paul uses the same verb in Ephesians 4:22 when he reminds the Ephesians that they have put off the old self with its practices and have put on the new self. The putting off and putting on speaks of turning from the old way of life to something new. The cognate noun apekdusis occurs only once in the New Testament in this very passage, Colossians 2:11. Now, what are we to make of this metaphorical term that essentially talks about removal applied to the rulers and authorities in Colossians 2:15? The idea of removal captures the nuance. While not destroyed, the supernatural rulers and authorities have been displaced or removed from the authority they held over the Gentiles. Who was it that removed this authority? The Most High himself, on the basis of the death and resurrection of Christ. Los, who's a commentator in the Hermeneia series, comes close to this idea when he writes that the rare verb means to take off, to put aside. The middle voice, however, can also be used in an active sense. Then it means to strip. God, through Christ, put aside the old order of the rulers and authorities. He stripped them of their authority. So I'll just stop here for a moment. I like that grammatical observation from Los there. I think it's useful. It helps, again, frame the meaning of the term in relation to what actually happened to the powers of darkness. So back to the book, back to the demons book section. The point of Paul's declaration is that the ruling authority of the gods allotted to the nations, Deuteronomy 32:8, and again, Deuteronomy 4:19, 20, 17:3, 29, 23 to 26, that ruling authority was declared illegitimate and null by the work of Christ. In the past, prior to Christ, the Most High had allotted the nations to the sons of God. Their authority was legitimate because they had been appointed by the true God. They were supposed to be in their positions. Psalm 82 tells us that these gods, sons of the Most High, Psalm 82:6, rebelled and became corrupt. Instead of ruling their people according to the sort of justice God desired, they enslaved them, ultimately becoming the objects of their worship and seducing Yahweh's own people into idolatry. Now, because of the cross, their rule has no legitimacy.
That is just a paragraph that sums up his whole dissertation to me, and what we have missed, y'all might not have missed, but I have missed from growing up in just our traditional Southern Baptist, any evangelical church really, is that there is a supernatural world. We say there is, but do we really understand what our Bible says about it? And he's saying that God gave them authority over the nations, and they rebelled, and like we missed that totally. And the whole Greek gods and goddesses we think is just false. Now I want you to listen to what he says about Plato.
Gentiles would have understood the implications of this, as early writers like Plato understood the gods had been allotted to the nations. I'm going to read a little selection from Plato here. In the days of old, the gods had the whole earth distributed among them by allotment. Let me just read that sentence again. This is Plato. Okay, it says in Deuteronomy 32, this is Plato. In the days of old, the gods had the whole earth distributed among them by allotment. There was no quarreling, for you cannot rightly suppose that the gods did not know what was proper for each of them to have. Or knowing this, they would seek to procure for themselves by contention that which more properly belonged to others. They, all of them, by just apportionment, obtained what they wanted, and peopled their own districts. And when they had peopled them, they tended us, their nurslings and possessions, as shepherds tend their flocks, excepting only that they did not use blows or bodily force as shepherds do, but governed us like pilots from the stern of a vessel, which is an easy way of guiding animals, holding our souls by the rudder of persuasion according to their own pleasure. Thus did they guide all mortal creatures. Now different gods had their allotments in different places, which they set in order. Hephaestus and Athene, who were brother and sister and sprang from the same father, having a common nature and being united also in the love of philosophy and art, both obtained as their common portion this land, which was naturally adapted for wisdom and virtue, speaking of Greece. And there they implanted brave children of the soil and put into their minds the order of government. Their names are preserved, but their actions have disappeared by reason of the destruction of those who received the tradition and the lapse of age. I'll end it there. That's from the Dialogues of Plato. It's the Jowett translation in 1892, Oxford. Again, the Gentiles know this stuff. It's amazing that about the only people who don't get this worldview are people who are Christians in the modern world. But again, this is important for understanding the supernatural framework of Scripture. That's why I wrote Unseen Realm. If you haven't read the book, you need to read the book. But they get this, and Paul's declaration in Colossians 2:15 about the rulers and authorities being stripped of their authority, they're stripped of their power, is important. And Gentiles would have picked up on what Paul was laying down. They understood the context. So back to my book here, I write, consequently, part of the good news of the gospel to those under the God's dominion was that they were free to turn from those gods and embrace Jesus. In fact, God was demanding their return to his family. The breach caused by the Babel rebellion had been closed. The gap between them and the true God had been bridged.
That's it. I'm just going to read that paragraph again. Consequently, part of the good news of the gospel, so thinking about this when we go out in our world today, the good news of the gospel to those under the God's dominion was that they were free to turn from those gods and embrace Jesus. In fact, God was demanding their return to his family. The breach caused by the Babel rebellion had been closed, and the gap between them and the true God had been bridged.
Isn't that beautiful? Oh, by the way, what does God want?
Family.
That's why he wrote this book. What does God want? He wants a family. That's the point. That's the point. He's bringing back the Gentiles, which if we have time to play these verses, which is, by the way, all in your Old Testament. In the Old Testament, it talks about the root of David, the Messiah. There are all these messianic passages. And in all of these, it's he will rule the Gentiles, he'll rule the Gentiles. This is in your Old Testament because that's what the mission of the Messiah would be. Let me just throw this out because we're about to run out of time. I cannot believe it.
I've not seen a word.
I know. What makes this uncomfortable? When people first hear this, especially like I've said, the baby Baptist evangelical world, when you first hear this, he uses an English word called the gods. And the first thought of the criticism is, that's polytheism. You get this kind of mess as soon as you Google this. You can Google it too if you want. But if you Google this online, that's the first thought. Now, if you actually read his book, and listen, we're just giving you a little slice. He starts off by explaining the Greek there, what Elohim is. And we talked about this in some of our prior studies here. The Old Testament word Elohim is not a proper name for God. Elohim is nothing more than, and that is what's translated in your English translation, lower G God, G-O-D, but lower G God, the gods, the gods. What Elohim is, it's a category. It's not a proper name. What's the proper name of the Old Testament of God the Father? Yahweh. Yahweh is his proper name. Elohim is written all over the place. And it's used all throughout the, anyway, let me just get the point. The point is it's a category. All Elohim means is a supernatural being. That's all it means. It's a category. We're humans, we're not Elohim. We're humans, we're human beings. They are spiritual beings. And there are two groups. There are beings in the spiritual world, and there are beings in the physical world. Humans, Elohim. That's what Elohim is. It's a category. It is a supernatural being. God is a Elohim. He is a supernatural being. He is the Most High. That's why you get all those descriptions of God. You get superlatives about God. Because all it means is he's part of that category. It's a category. Humans, supernatural beings. God's Elohim, but no other Elohim is like God.
And what bothers us now is when you hear that false gods or idols, little wooden creatures, and we think, oh, these were really stupid people back then. They worship little creatures.
Yeah, they thought a little wooden.
They weren't false gods. They were real, true, actual, authentic Elohim that ruled the nations. That God said, "I'm putting you over the nations," and they became corrupt. And so now, when Joel and I hear false gods, really, they're not false gods. We wrestle not with flesh and blood, but we wrestle with principalities and powers and rulers and authorities in the heavenly realms. That's what Paul said, right? So they're real.
That's why a lot of times I don't like using the word God there because it does make modern Christians uncomfortable. We wrestle with supernatural beings, spiritual beings. Just if that word drives you crazy, you're polytheistic, just throw that word out. Throw out the English little g God. It's a supernatural being. That's what Paul said. We wrestle with supernatural beings, spiritual warfare. That's what we're doing. All right, to me that's helpful.
It helps us.
And of course, we're giving just slices a day. We've actually had 3 or 4 weeks in this class many months ago where we kind of laid out the Deuteronomy 32 worldview. But remember, the whole point is, where was that whole system set up? It was set up at Babel. That's what Babel was. And what is happening at the cross, part of what's happening at the cross is Babel is reversed and the nations are brought back. That's part of what the Messiah was in your Old Testament. That's what your Messiah is doing, and that's what Jesus did. Isn't that interesting? This one of y'all are listening to the other verse. What he's about to do is he's then going to just read a bunch of Paul's other verses where you hear over and over again the Deuteronomy 32 worldview and the Paulness, all of Paul. And what's really cool, and you'll see it in your notes.
Do you want to just do it next week?
Yeah, we'll probably do it next week, but you'll see in your notes too that the book of Hebrews chapter 10. If you want to next week, just read Hebrews chapter 10. In Hebrews chapter 10, you will swear that, to me it's an argument why Paul probably wrote Hebrews, but there are grammatical reasons why people disagree with all that and all that. But if you read Hebrews chapter 10, you'll swear you're reading Colossians chapter 1 and 2. It's the exact same stuff, exact same words. He even uses the words, these are a shadow of things. The law is a shadow of things to come. Well, that's what Paul's about to say. He said all these things that you're getting caught up in are a shadow of things about to come, which was supposed to be our plan. We never even got to that point.
Yeah.
Go figure. By the way, so that's what Paul's doing. I'll say this and we'll stop. You got the cross from last week. You got the cross. Well, you got the circumcision not made by hands. You got the baptism. You got the cross. You got your debts being nailed to the cross. The certificate that stood against you. Because of all that, the unseen realm is delegitimized. They've lost their authority. God now demands you come back. That's what's being done here. Then what does Paul do? What we were supposed to finish. The next 8 or 9, 7 or 8 verses. Then he just starts going through basically 3 categories of things. He goes through, all right, so don't let anybody judge you by feasts and by festivals. Then he says something about the mystical practices. And then he says the last one is kind of false wisdom and philosophy. So what he's saying is because of all that, quit getting caught up in all of this, because all of this stuff is man-made with a demonic inspiration, those powers and authorities. That's what that is. But the fullness is in Christ. Christ is the fullness. He is the head, and all these other things bow down to him. And so what we're supposed to do then is go to, what do we see today? Today, what are things that have this false wisdom in them that we think make us wise, but they're really asceticism? Okay, we gotta go. All right, y'all, it's just cool stuff. I want to do it all together. We'll pick up on that next week. Dear Lord, thank you so much. This is some interesting things, and really what it's just done for me and for Meredith and hopefully for the class is just help us understand what you were communicating through the biblical writers. And it's just interesting, and it helps us understand that your plan was so big. And while it's critically important to us personally, there was also a lot going on far beyond just my personal self. And Father, we just thank you for that. We stay amazed by that. In Christ's name I pray. Amen. I cannot believe we didn't get any farther than that. We were going to go through the 7 feasts of Israel and all kinds of stuff. We didn't get any of that.
Next week.
Yeah, we were just going to land.